This is Jason Anderson, Chairman of the Killeen Town Council, and we are now back from recess. We will continue on in the budget presentation.
So we were picking up at the Parks and Grounds Department, and that is D20 in your books. So the Parks and Grounds Department, as I previously mentioned in the overview, the proposal before you is to move one of the seasonal part-time positions and make it a full-time position. So that is a $33,000, roughly $33,000 increase to the overall budget. It's a little bit less than that because the full-time line does include contractual wage increases for those union employees. And then overall, there's some additional increases, largely due to market costs and contractual services support. There's an increase in rental fees due to the portalets for Owen Bell Park and the Westfield Avenue over by the tennis courts. We put out portalets. So there is a little bit of an increase with that on those. So overall, there is an increase of $44,000, largely due to the increase from shifting a position from seasonal part-time to a year-round full-time position. Any questions on Parks and Grounds? Hearing none, we'll move over to Public Library. So Department 34, Public Library. This is the other department that we spoke about earlier. This is the one that is more substantially impacted by minimum wage impacts. So as I said in my summary pages in the very beginning, regular part-time line of a little over $25,000 of that is due to minimum wage impacts. A large portion of those part-time individuals are minimum wage, so they bumped to the 15.69. They will bump again when we get to that percentage increase. So that is an adjustment on this one. When we get into the contractual services component, the increase on audio-visual of $2,000, the library rolled out a little over a year ago the use of Hoopla. That is an audio streaming service. Also, you can get magazines, lots of electronic access that way. But that has a different cost structure to it. And so it's been a very popular service. And so the fees on that are a little bit higher. So that's largely what that increase is due to. You're seeing a decrease in telephone, and that is because we were able to successfully migrate the library's telephone system to the town's VoIP system. So that is a significant savings to them on telephone costs. So overall, there is an increase on this, again, largely due to minimum wage impact.
Can you tell us what the previous minimum wage was before it went to $15.69?
15.
It was 15. Thank you.
Yep. And again, it'll change again in January 1st, and we don't have that number yet. So that estimated. Correct. Any questions on library? Seeing none, we'll move to civic and cultural subsidies. This is a flat budget. This is assistance for flags, really, for Veterans Day, Memorial Day, for those honors at our local grave sites. The care of graves, that has long since been shifted to the Cemetery Trust Fund. And that's where that gets funded from. But this is really just those flags and honors on Veterans Day and Memorial Day done by our veterans organization. Yep.
Well, I just have a question. So if somebody wanted to go into a cemetery and do some upkeep, do they need permission from the town to do that?
If it's town-owned property, yes. Not all cemeteries in the town are town-owned. And they should really do the research to determine who is the actual owner and reach out to the appropriate owner, because some are privately owned property. And so you can't just assume that because it's a cemetery that it's town-owned, and we do have a full inventory of that. Any other questions? So I will move on to community center. So this is really the maintenance of the actual building structure at the community center. Labor, that is decreased because our custodian that we had independent, we had three custodians split between the buildings. That one custodian did leave. Our library custodian decided to move to a full-time position, and so we are able to achieve some savings. And so they're balancing that out a little differently. So that has a little bit of a savings here. We're also, so we've also been trending with a savings on our heating fuel, the natural gas and natural gas pricing. So we've been able to achieve a savings on there. So this is an actual decrease in this budget. Any questions?
With the building being so old, and now that we're going to Westfield,
Yep.
you know, a couple of years ago, we were looking at heating system problems, HVAC issues.
We're making it work until we get there.
Okay,
That's what we're doing. We are literally making it work
We're-
until we get there.
They're limping to the finish line.
We will get to the finish line.
Well, the rec people are very enthusiastic about moving over, you know. when you-
Does he have his mic on? Do you have your mic on?
The rec people, when they've been here, are, you know, well, we're soon gonna be over there at Westfield.
I'll
Avenue,
be
so-
excited when they're
so
over
it's
there
good.
too.
Yes, yes.
Many people will be very excited when we're over there. So, and that'll be coming up here in another year or so. Other town buildings. This is largely the Bugby building, which is occupied by the Historical Society. Just some minor changes in cost differences, water charges. We did have some leaking toilets, which is why you're seeing the $800 in the current year. That has been remedied and fixed. That can be a bit of a challenge with that building because somebody's not in it every single day, and so sometimes things can go for a longer period of time before they are caught and then remedied. But we think that we've gotten that under control. But just looking at trending, we know that we've been expending more than $200. And so I think we just haven't caught up on some of those cost changes that occurred with the water over time. So that's why the 500 in the current year, or the upcoming year. Any questions on that one? Seeing none, we'll go to building safety and inspections. So this one, the technical line is the contractual wage increase based on that union contract for those staff. Contractual services, there is reductions there. Knowledge and reference, we were able to back down because they are not anticipating another building change in the building code until 2025. So we have some time. That won't roll out until FY 2026. So we have some time in purchasing some of that stuff. And some of the professional development, some of that's kind of shifted to online, and they haven't needed as much materials in order to participate in those trainings. You are seeing, this is where I talked about before, you're going to see the decrease in due to CNR, and that's because of that vehicle shifting that we're doing. So there's the $10,000 savings there. So overall, this budget is decreased by $3,400, or just under 1% decrease. Any questions on this one? Seeing none, we'll go to animal control. Animal control, this is a contracted arrangement with NECOG, who operates the regional animal control. They have given us the cost increase, and this is largely, their explanation on that is due to veterinary care costs increasing, and the animal food, the feed costs have increased substantially. So all of the municipalities got an increase. They base it on per capita, so this is the town's share of that increase.
Do we see any, there was an issue with some horses, was that through them, or was that?
That was
we-
through, yeah, so there were 13 horses that were seized as part of this contract when there is a seizure that exceeds, I want to say $5,000 in total cost. The towns get a separate billing for that, which we have been receiving. We've been paying for that out of contingency. So that has not hit this one because it's not part of the base contract. That's an unforeseen, and that's why you have a
right, right.
contingency line. And it's been pretty substantial, I will say. 13 horses every single month is a lot of, and vet care that goes with them. It's been pretty substantial. I want to say we're upwards of close to 50,000, I want to say.
How do we pass that on? I mean, that,
So that, it's really up to the court. So
Okay,
they
all right.
have filed for the court, with the court, for the court to award full reimbursement, which would mean the town would also receive reimbursement. That being said, it's very unlikely, even if that's awarded, that recoupment will happen.
but maybe my question is, when does that end? How do we get out?
When the court deems that the seizure is, once they've awarded ownership of the animals to the animal control, and animal control has been allowed to release them for adoption. That's when that time period ends. And sometimes, I mean, the court process can take, these were seized the previous May, it's been almost a year. They just went to court a couple of weeks ago, where the court did deem that the seizure was appropriate and did award the animals to NECOG. They have to wait the appeals period. They're also subsequently filing for the costs associated. So they have to wait for an appeals process. And then ultimately, they'll be able to put the animals up for adoption. That's when our costs end. So we have a couple more weeks of it. Not quite a year. It will make not quite a year of that. But it is expensive. And again, that got charged to contingency because that would not be something you would budget for in an ongoing operating budget. It's very unforeseen.
And just to make everyone aware, this wasn't on neglect on the part of any horse owner or farm in town. These were ones that, if I believe, they were brought in from out of state. The owner brought them into a farm here in this condition that they were.
But we end up with the rest of it.
Any other questions on animal control? Hearing none, we'll move to law enforcement. Law enforcement, so there's a few increases here. The first one we talked about before with regards to constabulary. In the previous year, we did not budget 100% of the cost for our 8th and 9th officer. This budget that you have before you incorporates 100% of officer number 8, and it incorporates 100% of officer 9, because hopefully we'll be able to attract that person in. If it doesn't, if was it 100%? Yeah, it's 100% of officer. 3/4, you're right.
3/4.
Sorry. My brain, I'm like, as minute I said it, I was like, let me stumble on that a little bit. So, 9 months of officer number 9, because we know that it takes a while for us to get it in. So that's what we're looking at for that increase. I talked about also the armed security officer increase, and that is all 5 in. So we have, and any increase with SRO. The other large increase here is under contractual services, constabulary, 18,800. That's relating to the dash cam and body cam. So that was, we really went a year with charging that in the reserve because we really didn't know what that looked like. That legislation passed. We had to implement the program. We got it implemented, and we still really didn't understand what that is. Now that we have some history in it, you see in the current year, we're expecting on that line item, although we budgeted 8,700, we're expecting to spend 25,000. And so we're moving that to 27,005 in order to be able to accomplish that data storage requirements for the dash and body cam footage. And then overall, we're recognizing the savings that we're getting for motor fuel by already having locked in those prices. We know what that is. And then, so overall, there is an increase to this budget, again, largely due to that dash and body cam cost, and then fully funding those 8th and 9th positions. Recognizing.
question
So
on-
sorry, go ahead.
On the vehicle maintenance, there's no, where does the funding for the maintenance come from that department?
Highway has it all.
Okay.
Yep, yeah, so repair parts, we really diced out as to whether or not we should put repair parts in here or we should put repair parts in there. Ultimately, the highway department manages and maintains all of these vehicles, right? And, windshield wiper blades and, minor components like that, it's really hard to remember, well, did that go on a police, they document it all, but it starts to become dicey, dicing it in between the two. So we opted to put all repair parts
It
and
makes sense, it's town-owned vehicles.
motor oil and all of that goes into the highway department. It's much easier to see trends on on costs, impacts and stuff like that if we're just housing it kind of where the maintenance occurs on them. So they're all sitting in central garage.
Okay,
Because central garage maintains all of our fleet. And it just makes a whole lot more sense to stick it there.
Yep.
So that's why that's 0.
okay, thanks.
Going back to a comment that was made earlier during public comment period, what were we paying? I see on here you've got 196,000 for the resident state trooper. What was our total cost prior to the constabulary? Weren't we up over $1 million? in
We
what
were at
paying?
$1.2 million, and that was for 4 constables. I
And-
mean, that was for 4 resident state troopers.
Yep.
So this right here, what you're seeing, this contractual services resident state trooper,
It's just for
that is 1.
One, yep. So
Not
the-
a sergeant either.
Yeah.
That is a 1 resident state trooper
Yep.
who acts as patrol.
So that's
so look-
9 constables,
Yeah, so
an administrator, and a resident trooper.
for
Yes.
what for less than what we were paying for 4 resident state troopers.
For almost equivalent, right? Yes,
Yeah.
for less. I
Yeah,
mean,
less,
pretty
'cause
close.
The
Pretty-
budget, yeah.
Pretty close to what we were paying
1.15 and we were paying 1.2.
10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So,
So-
based off those numbers, I think the town definitely made the right decision to go the direction they did.
And that was part of that conversation part of that conversation was the town could get 10 law enforcement officers and 1 resident state trooper for the price of 4 resident state troopers. So you end up, there was a lot of concern around influxes in crime around town, and those are still studies and evaluations that a committee should do in determining the long-term trajectory of the program, or what I should say is the next phase of that program even. But those were a lot of those concerns, and by being able to put more boots on the ground, you really have an ability to really be a community-orientated police force as opposed to whoever comes out of Troop D that's responding. You could get nearly anybody. It's really hard to build relationships when Troop D has a pretty regular cycle of people of it being staffed. So it's hard to build those relations for the community members and for that response.
We're going from reactionary to community.
Yeah, and I will say, even with, one of our law enforcement officers being the SRO, has been able to really build a lot of those relationships with our children, with our kids, and has been instrumental in, proactively trying to kind of move the dial on some of these, some of our children that may have gone down different paths, right? Because they've been able to build relationships and build those that trust. So I think it's been very beneficial overall.
Thank you.
I have a question about the dash cams, because I thought there was something, and you say there's a law change. I thought there was something about they were going to have the storage, and that was a big cost.
Oh, the state was going to take the storage, and I've been arguing that they should take the storage and all the data. So the statute requires that we have dash and body cams. Initially, the state said that all of their resident state trooper contracted towns, because all of their police work product is owned by the state PD. We don't have any of it. It's not town of Killingly. So if somebody calls for a FOIA request, on a police report and they want a police report, we send them to the troop because it's not town property, it is state PD property. Well, then they figured out it was going to be a cost. And they said, okay, town, dash and body cam storage and management is yours. My argument is if their police reports that they write up and they put in their system are state PD property, so is also the dash cam and body cam. Because when you get a FOIA request on that, I still have to send it to state PD for them to evaluate, because there could be redaction that has to happen out of it, editing that has to happen out of it, right? They have to review that for eligible release, right, before it can be released. No different than the police reports. So my argument to the state is that still should be part of the services provided. Unfortunately, they, have still maintained that the dash and body cam security, storage and maintenance of that storage that cost is borne by the town, and we are independent from the state on that. So I still fight that fight. Every time I get in front of somebody that'll listen to that fight, I will fight it. But
that wasn't part of the original 1.2 million. That's totally just
correct.
salaries.
That's brand new.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's brand new. Any other questions on law enforcement?
Well, I'll just say, I'm sorry, you guys, to keep harping on this, but that might be worth something as you go forward and you want to sell this to show it wasn't just 1.2 million, because they were during the storage.
They didn't have dash and body cams.
Oh, they didn't. Okay.
They didn't even have.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there was none.
They didn't even have that. So that's a new implementation.
Just another unfunded mandate.
Correct. It is part of that police accountability bill. Yes. So, any other questions on law enforcement before we move on? Okay, we will move to the administration building. So this is Soap Street. So we expect that we will be they will be located in there for July 1. We have some final components that have to be completed over the next couple of months. So this is, now that we have a year's history with the building, we were able to fine-tune some things. So contractual services, M&E, this is putting a contract in the servicing of our HVAC and our heating system. We need to have a maintenance contract on that. That's what those are for. And then clearly sewer charges, once it becomes actively utilized, that sewer charge the usage will go up. We will have that. But we don't have water here because it is a well. So we don't have, that's why you're not seeing water charges here. But overall, pretty flat on this. All of this. And we'll fix the percentages.
So 2250 is for AC service contract?
A heating system and then and an AC heating.
Oh,
and a generator contract. We have a generator there.
Okay.
So it's multiple items. Yeah. And a fire system. Yes. I'm trying to rattle through all the different systems in the building. Any other questions on the building? If not, we will move to community development. Community development is a decrease. So we have the two positions. Again, that one amount is just due to the day component. All the other ones are really based on, we're now segueing off of some of those contractual relationships with other towns in which we were assisting them with those housing rehab projects. So we're removing those costs associated. And so that's what you're seeing that decrease for. So overall, this one has a decrease. Any other questions? Any questions? The next one will go to Human Services Subsidy, and again, you received the booklet on this one. I did review, there's the increase of 60,000 from KB Ambulance. They will be presenting directly to you. UCFS, which is a new request, they will also be directly presenting to you. The Paramedic Intercept, that is due to that regional Paramedic Intercept contract that has increased in cost. As Ula had mentioned, NDDH, that is a per capita rate that is set by the district. They are looking at an 80-cent increase per capita. That will be set in the next week is when they look to set that number. So largely, most of these, as what you saw in their request, a lot of them are per capita in nature. Some of them are to support specific programs, like the Last Green Valley is to support the Walktober event that they hold annually. So any questions on human services subsidies? Again, I don't make any determinations on what was submitted as a request. That comes straight to you as council members for you to make determinations around them.
With the 911 emergency dispatch,
Yep.
I keep hearing things with the fire districts, or maybe it's a town issue too, with similar road names
Sure.
and dispatching to, like the Bird Street issue.
Mockingbird.
Whatever.
Mockingbird Lane.
That one, and there's a couple others that are still kind of, I think it's a combination, both the town side, the dispatch side. I just got it from the Williamsville, we're talking about it last week about something.
Yeah. So
that- How do we interact to get that cleaned up? Because I think.
So that is a fairly complex issue in order to be able to kind of unravel. Part of that is, as you have newer people that are less familiar with the area, participating in those agencies, they don't know those nuances. Secondly, the town could consider looking through, this has been a conversation for many years about looking at, does the town want to look at getting streets renamed to have no duplication of streets? That has a number of legal processes that has to happen. People's deeds all say a certain thing. Their mail has been going to a certain address for, potentially decades, right? How does that work? And, who drives that conversation? I can more than gladly look into, what the actual process would be in order to truly, rename roads so you don't have duplications. But that's really, kind of what those challenges are.
Yeah, 'cause it's.
And that exists everywhere. That exists in every town across the country.
But when you're, like, John LaBelle was talking one day, because he was here today, I'll throw his name out. He said, when you're in the process of a heart attack, you want emergency services to get to you.
Agreed.
And,
Absolutely. Yep.
And, I mean, part of that, Ed, is people that call 911 need to know how to
Relay the information.
have to know how to tell them, I'm at section, this is my number. And the other problem was always the house numbering, which was one of the reasons why when I was on
Yes.
public safety, I said, hey, why can't we make our own numbers? So KB actually took it up. People can still get a whole, I think the form's on KB's website, where you can get a reflective number.
Yep. And that's key. That's
Yeah,
something
because
that was a huge
particularly when you're
challenge.
talking East Killenly and South Killenly, some of those driveways,
Oh, right.
Can't see.
you know,
someone
you
else
can't
should
see
put
the
it.
house from the road, so you need to put a reflective number so that when they're going up the street, they can actually find you.
Yep.
But even trying to give directions, I've been in a situation where we were at the Plainfield on Route 12 at an establishment right at the town line. A car comes crashing through the parking lot. So I'm calling, I do not know the house number, I know nothing. All I know is I'm on Route 12, the Killingly Plainfield Town Line, and these guys couldn't figure it out. So, I mean, I don't know how we can push, I see what you're saying, new people, but I gave as much information, it's out there, you know, but then you have the route numbers, you have a street name.
Sometimes if you can find the phone pole number, the electrical pole has numbers on them.
Right, right.
So those, you know, when you're stuck somewheres out there like that. But I had looked it up. I mean, you talk about Davis. There's Davis Road. There's David
yes,
Street.
yes.
There's
Right.
Davis. You know.
I mean,
there-
just between, North Road and North Street,
yeah.
right? I mean, I did that earlier.
One's way up there, and one's over there.
Exactly, completely two different places. Griffiths.
Griffith Street and
Street.
Griffiths
Yes.
Road.
Griffiths Road, one with an S, one with an apostrophe S. Right. So, I mean, it is challenging.
And then how many high streets?
Right, and which road gets to keep the name? So, I mean, that's all that
It's
is.
all
I mean,
right, there's a
that
lot-
doesn't have to do with this expenditure, but I mean, that's
Well-
what that is a challenge for emergency service response.
But then when but the dispatch decides the severity of the response. That's the other part where in their scenario that they,
Sure, based on the information that they're receiving.
so I just.
I mean, they have to go by the information that they're receiving.
Denial is a wonderful thing when you don't really want to admit that somebody's in trouble.
Right,
I'm not having a heart attack. No, it's just a really bad indigestion.
right. And then before you know it, it escalates really quickly. So, yeah. Any other questions on human services?
I know it might be a difficult one to answer, but all these requests we have, how many of these entities provide overlapping services where you get multiple entities that supply the same service?
I would say they're providing the same service. I would say you probably don't have a huge amount of overlapping because most of what you're funding here is specific programmatic things like the Youth Services Bureau, right? That while you're funding a United Services for that, United Services does a lot of things, probably similar to what UCFS would do, but you're funding the Youth Services Bureau, right?
Okay.
Which is one avenue of that, not just United Services as a whole, right? Day Kimball Home Care, there's a lot of Day Kimball services in the community. You're not funding Day Kimball, you're funding their home care program, right?
Yeah.
So these are, fairly, they're specific in programmatic request, but, I'm sure there's probably some lap over at some point. I've not done that, determination on if there's crossover.
Yeah, I was thinking about it with the new request from UCFS as to how much of what they're requesting payment for is services we're already having provided to the town.
Yeah, I would say that I don't know that we have a request that matches the same request that they're asking for funding, right? I think it's a different services than what you're already funding. But again, that's why we have them coming to present to really get a better, picture of that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on human services? If not, we will move on to employee benefits. Employee benefits really is just that. This is where we capture, our health insurance. That change in health insurance is just to recognize that we're moving a part-time, a seasonal position in parks to a full-time position that would potentially be eligible for benefits at that point in time. So there's that shift in there. The pension program, that is driven by the contractual obligated amount that we have to make for our annual required contribution to our pension, our defined benefit pension, and then also what we have agreed to within all of our contracts and our employee handbook with regards to the employer match on our defined contribution plan, right? That's all of those components.
I've got a question on that, Mary.
Yep.
I know it was like a 2012 law, and we got locked into getting retirements out of the red. Do you remember that? Did that affect you guys at all? Like, will some of
We
this
didn't.
drop off?
So we really didn't get impacted by that level of, that change, only because we've been 100% funded in our defined benefit plan for a long time.
I
A
was gonna
long, long
ask,
time.
Are we still funded?
We are,
100+?
we're a little over,
104% funded as of the June 30, 2023 audit.
a
Oh, sorry,
hundred,
104% funded as of the June 23 audit.
right.
Thank you, sorry.
Any other questions on insurance, on benefits? Then we will roll to insurance. This again is our property liability insurance. We also fund a self-insured losses fund reserve that we have, and that's to cover our deductibles when we have like a property insurance loss, like the town hall that we had earlier. We have our rates or our predictions already from Kerma. We've rolled that in. That's what that's really what we're looking at for premiums. So we did have a decrease in our workers' comp premium. Any questions on insurance? Hearing none, we'll go to special reserves. So this has been the department in which we hold the contingency, and then the town has made very specific, and as you can see, long-term investments in various reserves. This is actually really, this piece to your long-term planning has been very beneficial in our credit rating and in stabilization of your mill rate and in stabilization of that economic, financial future for Killingly. We continue to reserve for the revaluation. Yes, we just finished the revaluation, we know that. But in 5 years, you're gonna have to do it again, and it's gonna cost money. So instead of having to pay for it all in 1 year, we set aside what we believe that cost is gonna be, a portion of it every year in order to be able to have that to pay for it when that bill comes up. Same with info technology. We have an ongoing replacement of all of our hardware. So we keep our hardware current, so we are not as likely, we don't have as high of an exposure for security risks. And we're also not, really looking at significant concerns with regards to machines just dying and stuff like that. So we have hardware, but also this also funds like when we know we're going to need to do a change in our software costs, right? When we need to build up funding to do a major change in software cost. So we're requesting level funding for all of that across the board as we move into the next year. So it looks like a percentage increase because contingency in the current year was originally funded at $250,000. However, throughout the year, the council has authorized changes, movement of that, largely around wages, right? Largely around wage increases. So we have reduced the budget for contingency here because that budget has been reallocated to other places, right? So while it looks like there's an increase here, we are requesting the same level of funding as what you had approved in the current year budget. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions on special reserves?
Well, yeah, like, every year we're putting money into these. Is there some place we have what's in the reserve? Would that be something that that should be maybe a line item?
They're in the F pages.
Yeah, they're largely all reflected in the F pages as separate funds. There are a couple, you're right, that are not, and we could add that, and I appreciate that. I agree.
I can actually tell most of them if you want.
It's okay. Don't. We'll just give a
I can give a
report.
sheet,
Yeah,
okay.
because
Well, you
otherwise
guys
just
are-
rattling
That's what I'm
numbers.
saying, you
we're
guys
not
are
gonna know.
familiar with this. It could be in another
Yep.
place, and I'm just,
Yep.
wait a minute.
There are components that are all within the F pages, but I think we can provide that greater detail to you.
Monday, Tuesday.
Yep.
So he's getting, like, for the forest management, that's.
We
more
haven't
like-
expended anything out of that yet.
Right, but I mean, but we're adding to it.
Sure, because it's gonna cost more than $10,000 a year
Yes,
to do forest
yes.
management.
Oh, no,
So that's the, ongoing, continual, as we get into it, that request will likely increase over time because 10,000 isn't gonna be enough to manage your monthly, your annual costs associated.
And the other thing, the reserve for negotiations of pilot, what, a specific,
That's for Lake Road generating pilot agreements.
see, that would, if we said Lake Road generating.
But if you have another pilot agreement, you could still reserve to be able to negotiate that,
Okay, all right.
if that's what you so chose. Okay. Any other questions? Debt service is pretty straightforward. It's debt. We have to make those payments, right? They're bond issuances. We have to make those payments.
What are you seeing, I don't know if the right question. Are we increasing, or are we on a decreasing side? You have a little, I mean, we've
So,
had these over
we-
the years.
So we are going to be increasing over the next couple of years because we are adding in the debt for the community center. In 2030 and in 2032, the high school drops off. So you'll start to see a decline. Killingly has always approached our debt for as long as I've been involved with the town and much before then. One of the previous managers' approach has always been to do level principal payments, which means we don't fund our debt like the typical car payment or the typical mortgage, where you take the same payment every year. That's not how we do it. We actually do level principal, which means we take the debt that we're doing and we divide it by the number of years, and that's level principal. We pay that principal amount every year, and then we pay whatever interest cost is for that year, right? So you end up paying more in the beginning, and then it declines over time. As you go through that, it saves the town substantial amount of money in interest by structuring our debt that way. It also allows the town to be able to onboard other capital projects with a smoothing effect. You're not really jumping the mill rate at times, as long as you're staggering those in over the sunsetting periods of those others, or as the other debt is decreasing over time. So it has helped being able to better manage and smooth those mill rate impacts over time.
So the interest rate is fixed, it's just the principal that's going down.
No, the principal is, we fix the principal number. The interest ends up being less every year because you're paying more on the principal balance than just, like your mortgage. When you pay your mortgage payment, right? And you pay your mortgage payment, when that mortgage payment is set, it's a fixed payment, right? So they pay whatever the interest is, and then they pay whatever is left over on principal, right? So in the beginning of your loan, you're paying predominantly interest, and you may be paying a couple $100, if that, on your actual principal, right? We flip that around. We say we took out $100,000, divide that by 20. We're going to pay that principal dollar every single year. And then we pay whatever the interest cost is for that year. So, and our interest costs do fluctuate by within that 20-year time period, because it depends on how that bond was sold. So some may have a coupon rate of 3%. Some may have a coupon rate of 5%. We have so we do have a little bit of fluctuation in that. But that being said, we end up paying far less in interest because we end up paying that more on our principal from the very get-go, rather than waiting until you hit towards the end where it tips. And then you end up, like in your mortgage, when you get past, year 20, you're paying way more in principal than you are in interest, right? Or your car loan, when you get to the halfway mark or more, then you're paying way more in principal than you are in interest. We don't do that.
And the one thing, like I told you at the beginning, that I look back, and this is my 10th time going through all the budget numbers, the first budget season I went through, and we're in way better shape financially than we were back in 2009. Well, 2010 was my first budget season, and we've come a way long ways. We're financially, I remember us nickeling and diming just to try to keep it, never mind have reserve accounts like we
Well,
have.
I think the town has specifically made a lot of really purposeful, long-term considerations on how to better stabilize. Like, you have the ability now to have that conversation around not having to put as much in an operational budget for winter maintenance or for storm because you have a reserve. We didn't have that back then. In 2009 and 10, we didn't have that. We had a bad winter in 2011. I remember what that contingency looked like. We blew through that and then then we had to do a supplemental appropriation on that because we were clearing roofs with snow blowers and we had ice dams over the, right? So you have the ability now to be like, you know what? We need to shift and move. We have a good reserve balance right now. We can probably back down on that operational. If you start, really using up that reserve, you may go, hey, next year in budget, we might need to, reconsider that, right? So it does put the town, which is why when we get into those credit rating calls, they're very impressed with our financial stability because it really shows that long-term commitment and that long-term vision of stabilization. That the town and, the councils, now the councils before you have really continued to embrace.
It's like the pension, and then wasn't there a special benefit fund that we have that,
OPEB.
yeah, that's pretty rare for a municipality.
It is. We were one of the first implementers of that in order to be able to reduce that liability, and that has gone well with our credit rating calls as well. So we are now through the D pages. Everybody take a breath, right? I feel like we all, whoo. Our next section that we're going to go over is capital projects. So capital projects, let me first kind of go through on the funding level of this, right? The general fund contribution for pavement management is, if it's approved in the operating budget, it is active money in the capital project plan that you see before you. LoCIP money, we get that annually. That is one of the F fund pages. That is active money that we will be able to expend, and those are projects that we'll be able to expend. When you see projects that are, grant funded, or Board of Ed, state grant funded, or the funding, and I don't, the funding that we have for, we don't have any additional in here. If it were Lake Road generating funding, those funds are not available, right? So this is a plan. This isn't necessarily, everything in here isn't financed, right? Like, there would have to be additional steps, like for Board of Education projects, those would have to be, further appropriation would have to happen. A lot of that requires debt. If you see anything in here with bonding, none of that is approved, right? Those are plans, those are projections, those are potential next asks, right? But they are not automatically funded, right? So I will try and do my best to make sure I highlight ones that have existing funding coming in, and those that are just place markers, because those are fundings that we want to go for. We want to apply for these grants, or we would potentially look to seek possible bond and grant funding for it, but we may not necessarily have that secured or authorized in any way, shape, okay? Because it gets confusing. It always gets confusing for me. So let's try and dive through. I am going to start on E3, which is road construction. So road construction, there's really two primary funding sources on this. You're going to see there's two predominant ones, general fund contribution and town aid road, TAR funding, right? So we have been getting our town aid road funding, and this is projecting that escalated contribution from the general fund for the road pavement management plan. So that is really funding essentially the first two items, the road renewal, unimproved roads, road renewal. That's those two items. The next three items, Maple Street, Dyer Street, Louisa Vians, those are in outer years. You're going to see that those are in outer years. But those, we're looking at grant funding for those. Maple Street and Upper Maple Street, we're really looking at LOTSIP funding. Dyer Street, we've also put in a request for that one under the Community Connectivity Grant Program. That one, this last round, I don't believe that we're going to be awarded it, only because we have the outstanding river trail under the same grant program. Since we're going to be under construction with the river trail, we might be able to, the next round, be eligible for that, that project. And then Louisa Vians, this is, kind of really far out there. That is just, trying to make sure that we're keeping a focus on some of those connectivity studies that we did around making that area more accessible. And again, we would be looking probably at LOTSIP funding for that or some other grant source funding for that. Does that make sense? So those bottom three are not ones that are happening tomorrow because we don't have that funding identified as of yet. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go to, yep.
3.25 is including taking 1.25 extra from the general fund.
Yes.
Deleting the .69
Right, we talked about 2 million, but
mill
this is
rate.
you.
So remember on the revenue side, the use of fund balance is $2 million. On the expenditure side, I have that the general fund will contribute 3.2 million. So again, that's where I say, with regards to the revenue side for the general fund contribution, you can up that from 2 million to the 3.2 million, right? You can up that. And that reduces that impact on mill rate. This is reflecting the expenditure side, which is the 3.2 million. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Good on road construction. We'll go to highways, which is really kind of an extension of road construction, right? So this is our storm drainage improvements that we're looking at utilizing town aid road funds for. So that would be money that we have to use. Guide rail replacement, again, town aid road. Sidewalks, and $10,000 doesn't get you a lot of sidewalks, but it does get you a couple of sidewalk repairs. But that's 10,000, again, town aid road. The downtown drainage area improvements, that is the lake road generating. We're looking at potentially utilizing lake road generating money for that. So again, that is held in reserve. We won't kick that off because we know that that's a reserve dollar number, right?
Okay, getting back to that, so, but it's under,
General fund contribution, because it has to come from that general revenue that we identified in the
Right, but-
town.
but it's not gonna, so you have it under 25, year 25, but if,
Because that would be when the revenue would be,
oh, you have to.
I have to
okay,
tie
now,
it. I
you
have to tie it.
You have to show it.
Yes.
It may not happen, but you have to show it.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that
Correct.
was,
So it's a reserve, right? We're reserving
Okay.
for that. Route 12 sidewalk connection, this has been a request for a long time. I still keep going after the state for this. I'll still keep going after the state for this. This is creating a sidewalk connection from Big Y to the, essentially over the sidewalk that's over by the WPCA that connects to the river trail, right? Right now, there's that gap, and there's no safe place to put just a crosswalk. They don't even come close to connecting, and the sight lines are really poor to put a crosswalk over there. So we really have been working, and I continue to have that conversation with the state about some sort of a signaled cross, and potentially looking at installing additional sidewalks on one side or the other in order to be able to make that connection for safety purposes. We have a lot of foot traffic over there by Big Y. And the river trail. The second one is industrial park sidewalks. Again, this would be grant funding that we would look at for that, and that is adding sidewalks throughout that industrial park area. There's really not some sidewalks. People do a lot of walking through there, and they end up walking in the road where we have, a lot of truck traffic. So this is just kind of a complete streets view as far as putting that additional pedestrian type traffic area through there. But again, grant funding in outer years, that's not secured at this point. Make sense? Okay. The next one is bridges. Bridges, Cotton Bridge, Peep Toad, Wright Road, and North Road. Those were all submitted to the state for funding. They have given us an initial notification that they will fund them under the 100% funding for the under their new grant program. However, we have not received actual financial commitment here. So these are our bridges that really are going to need some work, and so we're trying to keep them on the capital improvement plan. So that way, you know, if that funding doesn't come to fruition, we haven't dropped them off of our long-term planning, so we can start to identify other resources. Make sense? Okay.
I have a question.
Yep.
So didn't we talk about doing a portion of North Road or all of North Road? And if
Yep.
what do we do, just tear up the new stuff and?
So we wouldn't necessarily pave over that bridge. And so this is the abutment components of it, yeah. Good question. Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll go to public buildings. So this is, I'm gonna keep renovation of third and fourth floor on there just because it's been on there since the 80s. I feel like it belongs there. I feel like it deserves a place in history, okay? So clearly, third and fourth floor renovation. I will say, probably in the next 5 years, we're really gonna have to talk about an elevator. That elevator is starting to get, well, it's well loved. It's been well used, but it's you know we're not gonna be able to meet ADA requirements with it currently, and the investment in it is going to outweigh replacing it, and that's really where the conversation is going to need to be had around: do you just replace it as is, or do you replace it and make the next 2 floors up above it far more functional by allowing the elevator to get up, even if you're going to just talk about storage, right? So that's where we really need to have that conversation, because that elevator, you know, if you're going to put the investment in the elevator, it's not much more to get it to go 2 more floors up versus just servicing the 3 floors that it currently services. So we are probably going to need to have that conversation. But, you know, clearly the demands of what is that space really going to be utilized for is going to change, you know, because now that we have Soap Street, that conversation has even changed since then. So we need to really be cognizant of, you know, what are really the demands. I will say planning and zoning and building and fire, they're going to likely need a larger space at some point in time. You know, we have 2 deputy fire marshals that are sharing the same closet. Literally. It is quite literally a storage closet that they're in. So we will need to... Randy's not in that one, but both of his deputies are, and neither one of them are necessarily completely little people. So, right. And even our building officials both of our building officials share the same office. It's really hard to get plans pulled out, and you got 2 of them trying to work in the same place at the same. It's very challenging. It's very tight. So initially, we are probably going to be putting finance in there for us to be able to renovate finance space. The finance office, the walls are kind of melting off the wall. There's been a significant amount of water damage. That's one of the last offices that have not had. We haven't shared the love with finance. We've just making them pay the bills. That's all we're making them do. So we really need to address that. They do have a vault, but beyond that, they're where the people need to live. That needs to be addressed. So we'll be moving staff into there in order to be able to accomplish that renovation, because we really just can't do it in that space. But ultimately, we will be making decisions around what does that space ultimately end up being, and what are the demands. It's too small to move that whole suite up into there. And there are a lot of benefits to having your land use agents and your building and fire right next to each other. There's so many people that come in with a question about land use that building and fire get pulled into immediately. And there's so much more efficiencies in making sure that people are fully aware of what their what their requirements are gonna be than than having them split. So it is a large suite to try and accommodate somewhere else within the town hall. But always willing to think outside the box. Still does. Still up there. Boxing ring. Yeah, yeah. I can bring you up there sometime. It's great.
There's a lot.
It's great. So, right, it did. So other things in here, anything that you see that is a 3 LoCIP funds, which is largely what you're seeing in the upcoming year. Town hall building improvements, again, you know, we need to do some repointing on the rear portion of this building. Then we need to renovate the finance office. The other one for the upcoming year is salt storage facility, the current salt storage facility, the roof of it. We're meeting the end of the useful life of that. That really is going to need to get changed out. So those are LoCIP funds that we're looking to expend in the upcoming fiscal year. The other components, most of them have been on here for a while. The vehicle wash bay at the highway garage, I think that one has been on here for at least 20 years. Agreed. The Parks and Recreation Storage Facility at Westfield Avenue, that's something for the town to potentially look at doing there with maintaining that facility, having mowers and having equipment located right at that facility as opposed to having to trailer them all over the place would be helpful. But again, not identified as a, you know, direct funded item and in a subsequent year. So let's get there first and figure out, once we shake out how much the BOE is going to need to remain for their utilization of some of that space versus us, right? Just trying to identify that. Eventually, we will need to replace the library parking lot. So those are just items for consideration as we continue on into trajectory. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go to Parks and Recreation.
Well, maybe let's go back to the, you're talking about the vehicle wash bay at the highway garage.
Yep.
Related on the other end, like that, the pit, do we look any, or,
They've already fixed it.
or maybe I'm looking at getting rid of the pit?
You
which
can't
is-
get rid of the pit unless you build a new highway garage. You
well,
can't get
I'm
rid of the
just-
pit.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, we looked at for many years. We didn't do any investment in that building because we were contemplating moving the highway garage. That's never come to fruition. They've looked at other sites, and every site, the town didn't want to make an investment in. And so we've now been we had to put a roof on the building. We've had to make some investments in that building in order for us to stay there. We fixed the pit, but the roofs are too short in order to be able to put a lift in there. You just can't put a lift in. So, the town would have to look at building another facility. And I would recommend you would build it somewhere else, not on an aquifer.
Well, that's, okay, this
Yeah.
is where I'm going with this.
Considering that, yeah.
That's the,
supposed to
that's
have
the
moved about
replenish
20
of the
years ago
main
as
water
well.
aquifer, yep.
Yep. So, that's where it's existed for a long time. That building has been there for a long time. It's been utilized as a highway garage. We're not in danger of, being told to, get the heck off of there. But, we can't really store any, salt or, we can only store a minimal amount. Our salt storage is located, as far away as you possibly can get. That's what they have to do. The facility is too small for what we have for equipment and for what the buses that we have. It's too small. The footprint of the entire, land property is, it's constrained. It has a lot of constraints to it. However, it's centrally located.
Right.
It is in the middle, right? But yeah, if you wanted to do any significant changes to like eliminate the pit and put in lifts, you're building a new facility.
No, that's,
That's what it is.
I need that beat out there.
Yeah, just like if you want to put an elevator in, you're building a new building. That's what it is.
Well, now you say that about the elevator, are we having issues with?
Nope.
with handicap it.
We do not, because we have a lower, the break room is in the lower, and they can replicate everything on the first floor.
Okay, yeah.
So no, they do not have an issue with that. But again, and I will say, by and large, the staff that have to utilize that, having that level of mobility challenges would be a challenge in just job completion,
Could
right?
be employed it, yeah.
Right. But either way, we are able to replicate what needs to be replicated, but there is no elevator there. Any other questions on public buildings? We'll go to Parks and Recreation. So the Westfield Athletic Courts, we are looking at utilizing funding to be able to actually kick off. So we have some funding already available for this, but we didn't have enough. We had 50,000. Bids came in at 85 over a year ago. We would like to be able to do both courts, get them done and over with. So I know pickleball is very, 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 very anxious to get pickleball in that spot, and we agree with them, but we need to have more funding for that. So would get the additional funding for that. And that's largely the only other one that we have in here, because we do already have a number of projects that we're going to be doing in parks this summer, largely being the dredging that we're going to be doing. That's really going to, you can only do so much capital projects in a park at a given point in time before the park becomes unusable. And, Owen Bell is heavily utilized. So we need to stagger in some of these over time. And that's what you're really seeing here, is the staggering in of those over time. Lions Park renovation. That park needs some love. It's been a long time since we've really loved the Lions Park and it's well used. So we would like to be able to do a renovation of that. We're going to be looking to see about getting some grant funds for that in order to be able to get that the Lions Club, and initially put that equipment in. So Bucky's been in conversations with the Lions about if there's some funding available to redo that park and redo some of that equipment in that park. Obviously, the gazebo is eventually going to need repairs. It's going to eventually need a new roof and some lighting and repainting. And then we are under construction now for River Trail Phase 5, River Trail Phase 6. The town has received a grant for design and construction of just over $6 million, $6.9 million. That is for the extension of our River Trail south through Plainfield. So this includes also the Plainfield portion. So Killingly, because we had an existing grant application in, when the state awarded it, they awarded the entire segment to Killingly. I've already had conversations with Plainfield. It makes sense for the state to administer that entirely, as opposed to Killingly trying to oversee something that's happening in Plainfield, and vice versa. The biggest caveat to that grant is that there's a big chunk in Plainfield, largely. It is a little bit in Killingly, but largely in Plainfield, that is owned by Connecticut Deep Wildlife Division. And the Connecticut Deep Wildlife Division has been in adamant opposition for a long time of any trail access through that parcel. So the grant stipulation was that both towns received some approval from Connecticut Deep Wildlife Division to install and utilize a trail through that property. That hasn't come to fruition yet. So I know that Plainfield's really been working on that, and I have really let Plainfield be the lead on that conversation, because the bulk of this impacts Plainfield. I mean, we have about, a few hundred feet. In Killingly, they have, 3/4 of this is that parcel, right? So way more impactful on their side, way more impactful on where the trail actually lands and where it ends in Plainfield. So I've really let Plainfield be the driver on that communication, because ultimately for Killingly, we would not pursue Phase 6 of our river trail unless where it's able to connect somewhere in Plainfield. We're not gonna, it doesn't make sense to leave it off at the start of Deep's Wildlife Division, especially given the challenges that they've had with ATV and dirt bike use on that, unauthorized use on that property that has damaged a lot of their habitats. Any questions on parks?
The Davis property with the
Yep.
gravel operation
Yep.
and the lack of capacity at the sewer plant and all that, is there any way, maybe we should accelerate the gravel operation to get us closer to a final,
Grade?
yeah, whatever we finally need?
Yeah, so we are working on what that picture looks like. And then we have had some really good conversations with the gravel operator. They're getting ready to go into their next phase of gravel operation that had already been pre-approved, that had already been approved. And so we're working on trying to determine what those final grades would be and where, what are we placing there and how things might be situated. So I wasn't ready to layer that into this budget, but I would suspect by next budget year, we're gonna have some more clear pictures on that and have better be able to outline better where and what is possible on the gravel side.
Because when I use moving the Little League field, at least we have a place for it to go with potentially the Davis property.
Yeah.
But to sell the increased capacity to sewer plant, no one hears that, but when you say moving the Little League field, what? How dare you? I
Yeah.
say, "Oh, but we potentially have a place.
Yeah, we do have a place.
We are getting some income off of the gravel. And there's so many layers involved with that.
And you'll see that revenue in one of the upcoming funds that we're gonna get ready to go over.
But that's why I just want to throw that out, that however if we can accelerate, who knows what the money for the sewer plant, we all say it takes forever, but if for some reason it does get accelerated, I'd rather get the Davis property in preparation,
Sure.
totally separate.
Sure.
From that timeframe.
Any other questions on Parks and Recreation?
Where do we see that $210,000? Is that in FY '26 that we just got?
No, so that's actually already received, so that's FY '24. We've already allocated. It doesn't have to reflect on here. Yep. Any other questions? If not, the schools, their capital improvement plan was in their budget book, so I don't have that separately listed here. It gets really cumbersome trying to transpose that, so we leave it housed in the Board of Education's budget. The next one is the water pollution control. And that is, again, funded by the WPCA, so this is not, there's no town contribution on this, and so they've been funding a sewer line replacement and their capital project equipment, so that's building improvements and pump stations. Any questions on that one? Seeing none, I'm ready to go into the F pages. Do you want to continue through the F pages and finish up today? Yeah? Well, I mean, you can extend past 2 o'clock. You don't have to, it's not a hard stop at 2, so.
The one thing I was gonna throw out there is the fact we've got, 12 pages left, 13 maybe. How would everyone feel about extending a little bit past 2 o'clock rather than having you come back on Monday?
I'll go with the flow, whatever works for everybody else. I'm going to the gym, but I can wait.
I will,
I do
Oh,
say-
that's right, yeah.
Right, well,
I'll show it to you before we leave, all right? No. There's probably still food back there.
Oh my God.
All right, so I'll see if I can keep go. You want to make a motion to keep? I mean, I don't think you have to because it's not like it was a hard and fast. It's not set by your regulations. It's up to you. Oh, well, that's okay. We're well past.
break all the rules.
We'll just break all the rules today. So capital non-recurring, the next 3 pages are capital non-recurring. So this is where we fund on an annual basis the depreciation value of our equipment over the life of that piece of equipment So when we gets to the end of the useful life, it can be replaced, right? And we're not having to ask for $200,000 or $230,000 now for a dump truck in a single fiscal year. It's now spread out over the life of that. And I will say, we set the life of the vehicle, but we recognize that, number one, vehicles can sometimes be, we have vehicles that are just great performers. We don't replace them just because the schedule says that it's time to replace them. Number two, we also sometimes have vehicles that are just pains, right? Like they're painful, right? And so sometimes we do have to ask for those to be replaced a little bit early, right? The vac truck was one of them. Also, there are, as this past little bit of time has been of attributable to this, we recognize that when we are depreciating off of the value in which we purchased it. If that vehicle has a 10-year life, chances are really good the market is completely different 10 years out from now. So that means that we probably are going to depreciate it for 12 years because we need to make up a market difference, right? So that's kind of how we manage all three of these. So really what you're seeing here is the money coming in from the general fund for the capital non-recurring. So that's all that capital non-recurring in all of those different D pages. That summarizes up to here. And then what we're expecting for expenditures out of that fund. So next year, we're looking at replacing a dump truck. Can I grab one of your
Yes.
things? Because now all of a sudden I got a tickle.
Sorry, I
It's
gave
okay.
it to you.
We're looking at replacing a dump truck, a grader, the fire marshal vehicle, a highway vehicle, and an engineering vehicle. That's but we have sufficient funds within those line items because we are very strict on all three of these funds. It is VIN for VIN, right? So we allocate the money revenue going in by VIN number. We also identify by VIN number what's getting replaced, and you want to replace this dump truck, it has this much money. You don't get to pick the depreciation from this one down here, no borrows. It goes by that. So that has maintained the integrity of all three of these funds. We do the same thing with student transportation, same thing with WPCA, right? So that's really what you're seeing in all three of these pages. The capital non-recurring for the student transportation, that is only student transportation, so their maintenance vehicles are not included in here. That was a conscious decision made by the town council some number of years ago. So they're looking at replacing two vehicles, 89 passenger and a 22 passenger. And then for the WPCA, their replacements that they're looking at doing is the primary pumping valve, a grip pump valve, and South Shore pump station controls. This is the controls for those South Shore pump stations. Any questions on the capital non-recurring funds? Because it's really, the three of them.
Getting back to F1, the voting machines. Now,
Voting machines.
The current year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what to ask, but, everybody's focused on voting. Are our machines outdated? Are they just need replacement? There's so much emphasis on it that, is there a possibility that they may miscalculate, miscount?
I will say that the voting machines here, we collectively recognize the voting machines as the entire voting machine and booth, right? So, the booths that you go work on first before you get to the machine. We're not looking at replacing the actual machines. It was called voting machines when they bought them 20 years, whatever, how many years ago, right? That's what they put on the schedule. But it's really the whole voting booth and machine. We're only replacing the booths. Because the booths, after being taken down, put up, taken down, moved around, all that kind of stuff, they're kind of falling apart. Like some people were starting to use the booth, and then it was like almost on the floor, right? Or like a leg fell off of it, right? And they were really having a hard time putting them up. So we are looking at replacing them with with new booths. The ones that we've had have serviced us well over all these years. they're tired. We need to put new ones in. So this is really replacing the booths, not so much the actual machines. We have more than enough machines that are functioning 100%, no concerns about them. And so we don't need to replace any of the actual machines. This is really the booths, the structures.
Is there any way that, like the booths, I guess that we are utilizing a Board of Ed building, is there, we gotta transport this around, and the transport is actually, that's probably doing more damage.
Actually, no, I don't think the transport is doing more damage. I think what it is you have to take it down and put it up and take it down and
Well,
put it up.
maybe that you're-
It's the collapsing and the re-putting back up. With anything, when you have to collapse it back down, you're impacting the structure of it, right? Like you're sliding things apart, you're, bending hinges and stuff like that. The school doesn't have room
Well, that's, right.
to house these. They really don't. So they get housed here at the town hall. And that's fine. I will say our highway department, they move them every time. It's really not been an issue. It's just, most of these are more than 20 years old. And there's not a whole lot to them. I'm actually amazed they've lasted this long, to be honest, but we do have a number of them that are just really not functional anymore. And so, they could potentially eventually become a hazard, right? Somebody's trying to work on it and poof, the thing collapses on them, right? You're going to have a problem there. So this is about replacing those booths. Okay?
I do have one question. Back on A3, the due to the student transportation CNR, there was a reduction of 46,000. And I know we're on the student transportation CNR page now. Why are we dropping the CNR down that much? Is there a reason? Are they taking one vehicle out of the fleet?
Yeah, so actually what had happened with, and this really is kind of that accumulation. So what had happened was about maybe 8-9 years ago, the Board of Education started buying smaller vehicles, right, which cost less money. So their depreciation is less. But when those bigger vehicles sunsetted, and as they sunset, the newer vehicles that come on, had been smaller vehicles, that's where your difference comes in, right? So
Okay.
you have less, the less overall in depreciation costs. Same number of vehicles, it's just, they went through a period that they were buying not much smaller, but smaller vehicles, not quite as large. Given some of the rural roads that they were going down and stuff like that, that's why they made that decision to move to those smaller vehicles. And so that was allowing them, that their depreciation on an annual basis is less than a full large size vehicle.
Okay.
Any other questions on these three? If not, we're gonna go to NIPS. Nips, we're there. All right, so clearly we've been tracking this now for more than a year on what the town is going to receive for revenue. I was very purposeful around that and not making any recommendations last year because it was really unclear what the actual revenue trend was going to be on this. And so the fiscal subcommittee, actually, I had done a presentation at the fiscal subcommittee and talking about, what potential uses there might be, and they had some really great input on that. And one of the things we wanted to focus on was the sweeper. So repurchasing a sweeper is an allowable use in this fund. So we've moved the depreciation for the sweeper out of the operating budget and the vac truck out of the operating budget and into this budget, right? So that provides a relief on the general operating budget, and it puts it into this revenue source that it is allowable in.
Now, when you estimated going forward, the 5 cent to 10 cent change, is that
It's
reflected?
going to double it. We're not seeing a decrease in that revenue. It will come close to doubling it. So, we may be able to look at other programs outside of what we're just doing right now. This was an initial entry into being able to provide some relief on the general government side while identifying what the restricted uses are for this revenue.
It's just mind-boggling because it looks like we're selling over 2.5 million nips a year in
It's a
Killingly.
lot of nips.
That is,
on the sides of the road?
walk on my front of my property.
It's a lot of, it's staggering how many nips. We
And the other staggering
we had no
thing was-
idea.
Yeah, and
Well, any other,
That's staggering was a good word.
So like Norwich,
Norwich is the highest,
the highest.
the highest, and
It's
they're Norwich
Norwich.
in the
Norwich.
state.
wild.
Yep,
It's
Yep.
almost unbelievable.
it's mind-boggling.
I'm sorry? Oh. No, I have one son that works at EB. He's a rigger. He's a rigger. Thankfully, I am so thankful my sons don't have an idea.
There you go.
I am very thankful about that, and I'm pretty positive they're not hiding it from mom. Although they could, which is fine, but
Yeah,
That's all right.
no, Trust me, my kids tell me everything, and I wish I didn't.
so yeah, so that's the NIPS, and again, like, you know, we'll be probably bringing some potential ideas to the solid waste subcommittee around, you know, we had some people that were, you know, wanting to talk about composting and stuff like that. We were looking at some potential composting machines that maybe there can be some community share on, where this picks up a portion of that cost, and then the member that wants to participate in the program has a cost too, to be able to kind of relieve some of that. So there's some really great ideas that we want to be able to bring forward, but this definitely was kind of the entry gateway into, now that we know. The next one, Capital Reserve Fund. Here's your sand and gravel. This is how much revenue we're receiving from the gravel operation, and right now they're in that reserve fund is $1 million. That has always been, as long as I've been here, and had been well established as a communication when I came on board in 2009. This was to redo that into athletic fields. That was always the intent of the revenue generated from that, was to use it. The town did use it a couple of times for some work at Owen Bell, because it is allowed to be used for open space or for recreation space. But this has been largely always dedicated or communicated that this would be installing the athletic fields, because your gravel operator does not install athletic fields.
And can you explain it to me?
So this is the Davis property on Lower 12.
Oh,
The
so
town
when I
owns.
come to the end of the river trail, right there on the left?
Nope.
Or is
Actually,
that Jolly's?
that is Jolly's. Yeah,
That's
that's Jolly's. But no, this is Lower Route 12. So across from where Taft and Waterman, well, a little bit north of Waterman. So Taft and Seagrave.
Okay.
Taft and Seagrave. If you go on the other side of Route 12, it's wooded right there, right?
Okay.
Behind there is a gravel operation. And so the town owns all of that property. We lease that space for the gravel operator to gravel it, with the intention was that they would gravel it to where we would then be able to have space to do athletic fields. And we would have athletic fields in the lower portion of the town.
Oh, okay.
Yep. The drive we have to identify like where the drive goes. There is a vernal pool on that site. So yeah, it's a really great opportunity.
So what that's what I say, in addition, when I say the Little League field has to move, there is funding, you know,
Yeah.
it is generating some money, so it's a
Yeah.
double, but if it's not out there, it doesn't get any comment, and we gotta push the sewer project, and this helps it, and there's money for the, you know, getting some development on those fields.
The other one right below that for capital reserve is information technology. So remember, in our reserve funds in the end of the D pages, you were funding 50,000 for that reserve. That's where this goes. So we have 280,000 in that fund to be able to manage any emergent IT related needs. This is where we replace all of our printers from. This is where we replace all of our, hardware from. And then also, if we have any emergent or any substantial change in software. This is where we fund it from.
Maybe another comment, I don't know about what, the Davis property. Say someone wanted to make, they had a great interaction as a kid with Little League and whatnot, and they wanted to come forward to the town and make a substantial contribution to something.
Sure.
Where would something like that go?
So it would depend on what their restriction, what they want to donate it for. We would put it in whatever that appropriate fund is. So, the town receives donations, and it becomes a restricted use item. So if they want to have it for the development of future athletic fields, that's what it would have to be designated for. If they want it, depends on what their requirement is. They would come to my office to review what it is that donation would need to be, and it would flow into the finance department for them to allocate it into the appropriate fund. Because we get donations all the time and they're project specific.
Well, again, the same thing. I'm trying to promote positivity for the sewer plant capacity expansion, and we gotta get the Little League fields going somewhere, but if
Yep.
someone has extra money that they would wanna donate, okay, help
Sure.
us out.
Yep. The next one is the non-lapsing fund. You have an expanded detail on the non-lapsing fund in your upcoming, in your Tuesday night's meeting. Because you guys are going to be deliberating on their request to refill it after the 2023 year. So that's what the 411 is. You have that on your upcoming agenda. And then an estimation based on what they've authorized for use out of the fund currently. So that's the non-lapsing. And we were going to look at, after we produced this, we were like, oh, we probably should put like an expanded, like what did they actually approve things for? Just so people can remember like so we are going to expand on that. It's just this, like we literally thought about that like 2 days ago, and I was like, oh, we probably should have done that. So always an improvement. There's always room for improvement.
But with this money going in, we have to wait till the audit is done.
Correct.
To make that specific allocation.
Because it's required to be on the audited number. The next one is LoCIP. So this is a local capital improvement program. This is money that comes from the state as a grant to the town. It does, there are certain eligibility requirements for projects for us to be able to get reimbursement from this. But this is how much we have and this capital projects, what you're seeing, the $180,000, that goes back to what we talked about for LoCIP projects in the yellow pages. That's what we're looking at doing. So that's the LoCIP program. Next one. Self-insurance fund. When we were in the insurance pages, I mentioned that you fund $10,000 towards a self-insurance fund. This is the self-insurance fund. So the general fund and the sewer fund both contribute to this self-insurance fund, and it is to cover those deductibles, right? So when we have a deductible that we have to pay, or we have something even that is a loss, but ends up not rising to the level of a actual claim, we will pay for it out of here because it is, we self-insure it at that point in time, right? So if our deductible is $10,000 and the loss is only $6,700, we fund the $6,700 out of here, right? We don't take it out of the operating budget. But it has to be something that would truly qualify as like an insurance loss.
So did we have one this year? Didn't we have one? Or will that show up next year for the basements? You know what I mean?
Oh, for the WPCA. Yeah, that's part of the expenditures in the current year, the $43,000. So we didn't have to pay for all of that. That was just part of that. We only had to pay a deductible on that. Kerma covered everything else. That was a hefty cover.
Yeah, so I guess my question was, what is the deductible? What was the
So
deductible?
for property claims, it's $10,000. Yeah, $10,000 for a property claim. And then we also have some in there that are, didn't rise to the level of a full-on claim, and so they were paid out of that, yeah. But I think that backup situation was by far the largest. Yeah. Very good. And then, we good with that one? Self-insurance fund? Nathan Prince. So Nathan Prince is a trust fund that was given to the town, I don't even know when, a gajillion years ago. It's administered by the Bank of America. The actual trust fund itself is over $1 million. It's like 1.2 million. roughly. We receive an annual distribution from that fund based on the interest. And so but it is restricted on what it can be used for. It can only be used for books. That's what it can be used for, is books. So the town has been for a number of years. We reduced the operating budget of the library for their knowledge and reference materials, and we funded it through here, right? So clearly well sustainable within this, even though, annually, yes, we're receiving about $26,000 in interest, but we have a fair amount of built up available money for us to expend, and so that's what we've been utilizing. Any other questions on Nathan Prince? Our fuel system trust. So our fuel system trust, everybody who is eligible, who gasses up at our pumps for diesel or gasoline, we charge an additional 3 cents surcharge on that. So that 3 cents goes into this fund, and that covers any maintenance on that system. So that means all of the users are contributing to that maintenance. So we have fire departments that use it. We have KB Ambulance that uses it. The town and the Board of Education, everybody contributes. And so that's what this fund is for maintaining our pump system, our fuel pump system. Any questions? Solid waste, you guys had a full presentation on this last month. Do you want me to go back over this, or are you guys solid on solid waste? Solid on solid waste. How's that? You can tell we've been here for a while, right? Wow, that's a punchy joke. Right? I'm getting punchy.
Will we have for the public the increases? That might be good, like,
Sure.
yeah, so they can see it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. They will be whole, no, you're right. I'm sorry. I crossed on my brain. Yes, we will make sure I have those available again. Yep. We'll have a lot of budget to go over. And I know Board of Ed behind me is going to want to go over the budget too. Winnie may not want to let us leave at some point in time, because I'm sure we'll both take up the full hour, which is good.
They've only let us do an hour.
Well, I'm sure if I ask for more, we could probably, they would let us run over. Any other questions on that one? The sewer one, I am not going to go over because they are presenting to you on Tuesday. So you'll have a full presentation by the WPCA on Tuesday for their budget. And ladies and gentlemen, that wraps us up for budget presentation. I'm sorry? Well, you guys still have to finish here, so you're not done yet, I guess.
Any further questions, comments from council?
Oh my God, Patty, you're gonna see this. I'm like, what I do now?
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Mr. Grandelsky, seconded by Ms. Barclay. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? This meeting is adjourned.